Okay, perfect. Hi, and welcome to our Learning Sneak Preview live session, introducing the SAP Analytics Cloud Planning Learning Journeys. I'm Dilara, and I'm here for the technical moderation today. Let's start with the technical part. So, as you already noticed, you can't turn on your webcams or unmute yourself because we are all in the webinar Zoom mood today. But don't worry, in the Q&A tab down below, you will be able to ask some questions and we will answer them in the end of the session. So this live session will also be recorded, but we will cut out the Q&A part in the recording. Another point that I would like to mention is that you will find on learning.sap.com under the learning journeys some Q&A and deep dive live sessions. So with the Q&A live sessions, you can gain answers to questions arising from your self-study. Expert deep dive live sessions fill knowledge gaps on specific topics which are difficult to grasp or additional topics that are not included in the learning journeys. So that was actually from my side. Now I will give the words to our expert.
Thanks, Dilara, and welcome everyone. Let me share my screen. Okay. And all right, so I'm Tim Soper. I'm joined by Martha Thiem. And let's talk about our agenda here first. So we'd like to introduce you to the first of several learning journeys for SAC planning and the resources that you can use. Let's review what our plan is here first. So basically, let's talk about the current learning journey. This is a new one, by the way, actually, and this is as of July 2023. Let's go over the training material for a few minutes. Then let's talk about certification, which goes along with this learning journey. And then also let's discuss the practice systems and accessing practice systems. And then after that, then I'd like to talk to you about upcoming learning journeys, because this is a growing area right now. So with that, let's take a look at learning.sap.com. And maybe, Dilara, if you could put that in the Zoom chat there. But now when you come into the website, you can just search for SAC planning. But let's go and look at the learning journeys for all of SAP, so you can see those. And again, this is changing every day, every week or so. But if you just simply search for SAC planning, for example, and you'll find the new learning journey, leveraging SAP Analytics Cloud functionality for enterprise planning. Okay, and so we come in here and let's take a look at this new learning journey. So what does this feature? Well, this learning journey is intended for those of you with SAC experience and also planning experience, but you're new to SAC planning. It is business scenario based. We have many business examples. We have videos throughout the material used to lay out the business scenarios, and also they show you how to configure planning in the system. We have recorded exercises so you can get your eyes on the system. We also have it is based on current functionality because we update this material every quarter, believe it or not. So we're current here. So now in the learning journey, if I scroll down a bit, you can see Unit 1 introducing SAC planning. Okay, so in Unit 1, we'll lay out the business scenario for the rest of the class, and we'll identify the implementation steps as well. So, and in this unit, kind of scroll down a little bit here so you can kind of see the layout here. And then let me kind of show you one of these videos. This is the first one. Okay. Now there is audio, I'm not gonna play the audio, but this is gonna lay out the basic business use case for the course. Okay, so our mission is to prepare the income statement for the forecast for ABC Corporation for 2025. And in order to do that, in the preparation step, we configure planning models as well as other SAC planning objects. We'll talk more about those in a minute. Okay. We also perform planning in stories and basic stories using data tables with built-in functionality. We use predictive analytics for forecasting and Smart Predict to supplement the planning activities. The analytics occurs throughout the process, but then towards the end of the planning process, we'll finalize the plan, we'll lock our data, we'll do our status and tracking in the SAC calendar. Okay, so in Unit 1, that sets the premise for the rest of the course. And then in the second unit, planning and stories. So planning and stories, we work with private and public versions. And if I scroll down again, you can see here's a video. It's going to talk to you about a business scenario, and it will also take you into the user interface where you go to create versions, for example. So in this unit, we'll talk about adding members on the fly, planning and data tables using built-in functionality, and the most efficient way to perform planning. And also we'll use the built-in planning panel feature that's available. In addition, I want to point out to you that as you look at this material, you'll see wherever it says start exercise. And if you click on that, you can go and you can see the steps that are required to configure planning or to use the planning features. And in these recorded exercises, we very carefully explain to you why it is you need to do what we're asking. And then as you roll or proceed through the steps and you complete your steps, then we explain to you what you did. So that's the idea. And you can see, you get systems, you get a look at the system that way. Okay. All right. In the next unit, configuring data actions. And by the way, data actions are used to automate planning tasks. So for example, you want to copy actual data to plan data, for example. So in this unit on data actions, we'll build and run data actions to copy data within a planning model, but also to copy data between planning models. Okay, we'll create advanced, and let me kind of click on the hyperlink as I go, so you can see how the content is kind of laid out. Okay. In addition, we have advanced data actions, and these are formulas. And these formulas are used to perform calculations like, let's calculate labor based on labor hours times labor rates. Let's calculate benefits using a percent benefit rate. And we'll explain how to efficiently configure these advanced data actions, as well as the syntax and the commands. And we'll give you a few business examples on how you can use advanced data actions. We'll also run data actions from stories. And then in addition, we'll show you how to schedule data actions in the calendar. And then we'll bundle data actions, multiple data actions into what they call a multi-action. And then we'll get into tips and tricks and best practices. What's the best way to configure advanced data actions? And also in here, we'll take a look at the delivered performance tuning story that's provided with SAC. In the next unit on allocations, this topic deals with allocating corporate HR or allocating corporate overhead based on number of people, for example. In this unit, we'll create allocation processes. We'll also, first of all, we'll lay out the business scenario, then we create the allocation processes, as well as the new data action allocations. This is a new feature as of just 2 or 3 months ago. In this unit, we also have a business example on how to allocate based on prior year actuals. And then we get into performing allocations and stories. In the next unit on currency translation for planning, we start with the business scenario. Okay. And then we get into the SAC exchange rate table, how to populate it, what are the field definitions and so forth. And then we create converted measures in the models and in the stories. Converted measures are used to convert currency on the fly. After that, we get into currency data actions, which are executed, and the results then can be stored in the data model, in the planning model, where we need to do that. In addition, in the currency unit, we do several comparisons. For example, current data at current exchange rates versus prior year exchange rates. And we'll also do a constant currency analysis. Now, in the forecasting unit, we work with, we build rolling forecast layouts. These are dynamic layouts taking into account the current month automatically. We'll run predictive forecasts from stories, and we'll publish the results into the planning model. In addition, we also build predictive scenarios using Smart Predict, and we use that time series, the result, to update the planning model as well. And then in addition, we build value driver trees. Value driver trees are used to perform graphical simulations. So for example, what would happen if you change the growth rate from 5% to 10%? What would happen if inflation is 6.5% versus 7.8%, et cetera? And it's a graphical simulation tool. The last unit is on coordination and controlling. Here we activate data audit, so we know who changed what data and when, and we'll run reports there. We'll also configure data validation. This is used to do a combination checking when we do manual planning, as well as when we run data actions. Towards the end of the planning process, when we need to prevent any more data changes, we'll configure data locking and use it to lock data intersections to prevent data changes. Last but not least, we have the calendar processes. These are used for status and tracking and collaboration, and we'll include reviewers here. So we have approve and reject steps for separation of duty. Okay, so that was an overview of our first learning journey. And now what I'd like to talk to you about would be certification. So let me go back over to the website here, and let me come back in fresh into the SAC planning learning journey. Okay. All right. So now when it comes to certification, the Get Certified link at the top of the page is a generic hyperlink. But for SAC planning, let's go down, and just above Unit 1, we have another hyperlink. And if you click on that hyperlink, then this is the certification question that goes with this learning journey. Okay, so now in this case, this is a 60-question test. You get 2 hours, and you need at least 63% to pass. And then in addition, if we view the certification, now this is very important here, that this is where you can access the sample questions. Okay, come back to that. Or maybe let me go into the sample questions. So there's the landing page, then you choose continue, and then you have 8 questions that you can try to get a feel for what you need to prepare for. So let me close that. Then I'll go back to the certification landing page. And then these are the topic areas for the certification. So planning and intro and stories, 31 to 40%, forecasting, coordination, and so forth. These are the groupings. Okay. So I wanted to talk to you about the certification, and let me see if I can go back into the learning journey. And we have a link for practice systems. And when you click that link, this is to access an SAP training system with data sets that go with the exercises for this learning journey. So it's ready to run. And now when you go through here, though, when you follow the hyperlinks, it does talk about the Learning Hub subscription. So you do need a professional Learning Hub license to access the training systems. And you get, I think it's like 60 hours of system time. So, all right, so I'm going to talk to you about accessing the training systems. So now we've talked about the learning journey, we talked about certification, and now what we can do is the future, because right now we only have this one learning journey for planning, but you see we're just getting warmed up. All right, so now let's talk about the future. So now I'll go back over to the slide deck here. So we just talked about the current learning journey, which is an intermediate learning journey. And then now you can see that we have 3 new learning journeys coming up very soon. And these are going to be advanced learning journeys. Okay, so the first learning journey has to do with business warehouse. So integrated planning with BW. Now, who is this for? So this learning journey would be for those of you who are planning with BW already. Maybe you're using integrated planning, okay? And you want to use SAC planning in conjunction with BW in a hybrid planning scenario. So in this learning journey, you'll import master data from BW tables. You'll import transaction data from BW tables. You'll do your planning in SAC. Then if the situation calls for it, you will export the data back into BW tables to be used in subsequent processes on the BW side. The second new learning journey will be business planning and consolidation. So for those of you who already use BPC, this is for you. And you want to develop a hybrid planning solution in conjunction with SAC. Now remember, if you are familiar with BPC, you know there's 2 different flavors. There's BPC Standard, which is also known as Classic. There's also BPC Embedded, also known as Unified. This includes both flavors of BPC. Okay. The third new learning journey in Q3 will be the designing extended planning stories in SAC. So as you might realize, most planning users can use basic stories without any scripting. But when you have more complex business requirements, then we need scripting to build the extended stories. Now, just as a reminder, the new Universal Story came out, 3 months ago or so. And with the new Universal Story, now we do basic stories development as well as extended story development in the same user interface. So we don't use the analytic designer anymore. Okay. So in this learning journey, what will we do? Well, we'll build custom comment extended stories. We'll create pop-ups that trigger data actions. And we'll configure form-based planning extended stories. And those can be, and these extended stories, they can be bulletproof. Okay, so you can kind of control what is in the user interface so we don't give the users too many things to click on. In addition, we'll build a master data extended story to add members on the fly, but in a controlled way. Okay, so that's in Q3. Now in Q4, we're not too far away from Q4 either, are we? So this is integrating SAC planning with SAP S/4HANA, both finance and group reporting. So finance, accounting side, general ledger, but then also group reporting. Now remember, group reporting, that's the preferred tool of choice for month-end closing now. Okay. Now, we'll get into delivered content for group reporting, but then in addition for accounting, we have the financial planning and analytics content package, and we have the integrated financial planning content package. We'll explain to you how to activate the content and how to use it, because the delivered content can speed up implementation times. After that, we get into importing master data and importing transaction data. We'll do planning. And then when the situation calls for it for you, then we'll export the data back to the SAP Suite for HANA accounting table, the planning table. And then we'll also export data back into the group reporting table. And that's going to be in Q4, towards the end of Q4. Okay. Then next year, we have planning with SAC add-in for Microsoft Office. Okay. Now this is the relatively new add-in for Microsoft Office 365. Okay. Now this is not the SAP analysis for Microsoft Office. That one has been around for more than 10 years. This is the new add-in that's still being developed. So we have new features every month or so for this new add-in that runs on Office 365. And in here, this will be one of our new learning journeys for the new add-in. In this learning journey, you'll create workbooks for planning. You'll use the delivered SAP functions to do filtering, for example. You'll build cell-based input forms. You'll also perform manual planning. And then you'll use data actions. Now remember, this add-in, this is Excel. Okay, now this is both for web Excel as well as Excel on your desktop. And so we'll use data actions in this Excel user interface. So this provides another user interface to perform SAC planning. In this case, it's Excel. So this wraps up our SAC planning sneak peek. Thanks so much for watching. And now I'd like to just hand this over to Delaria. So Delaria, over to you.
Thank you, Tim, for this awesome presentation. So I would say I'm going to end this recording right now here, and then we can hand over to the Q&A part.